Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. So we are starting our session and our geopolitical dialogues, which we are conducted on the basis of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and it is the session which is held constantly, and we are discussing the internal or external questions, political questions of the modern Ukraine, but here we're trying to discuss it on the more global level. We're discussing the international trends and the perspectives and the forecast, maybe even some assessment of the situation. The participants of our dialogues, they are expressing their own opinions, sometimes subjective, personal opinion, and that is the attempt to combine these kind of things. But I hope that today we will have an interesting dialogue, because today we have two very interesting speakers on this topic. That is Valeriy, the head of the chair of the board, and all of us of Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and all of us know him as the extraordinary and Plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine, and he is a very honored specialist. And the other participant is the professor of political sciences of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. He is the scientific director of the fund Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives, and just a moment, I will repeat. The scientific director of the fund, Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiative. Our main objective is to honor our participants in this dialogue, and we do not want to offend their opponents or anyone in general. So, geopolitical. And also, I have forgotten to introduce myself, Volodymyr Horbach, the political analytician of the Institute of the Euro-Atlantic Cooperation, but now I'm becoming the executive director of the transformation of the Northern Eurasia. And that can become not only the topic for the dialogue, but also for the fight. Well, then we will come. If you don't mind, if we will be invited after today's session, maybe we will be invited with the other participants of the institute, and we can try to do that. So the topic is geopolitics today, and maybe on this point, so there is lots of discussion on what is politics, and using this opportunity, today we have the professor of political sciences, so maybe that will be my first topic. Mr. Haran, what is politics, and what do we need it for? So when I'm starting the lectures, I'm always starting with the point that I'm one of those people who are starting with the definitions, how to define this or that. We need to consider each element of politics. So that is what I'm good at. So we are not going to give the definition. So that is a cooperation of the geopolitical actors. So first of all, there are the states. Before that were empires and kingdoms, and the cooperation. And nowadays we have the discussion about the concept of the balance of powers, or maybe there are some other factors, the factor of values, because when we are talking about the democratic countries, the democratic Western countries, how relevant this issue is for them, the balance of powers between themselves, or maybe they prefer the values. So it is commonly used that democracies do not fight with each other, and they should have fought with geopolitics. The weak should join together against the strong ones, and our Western partners mainly, and we as politologists, we are emphasizing the values and moral, which should be the basis of the modern politics. But at the same time, we have to be realistic, because nevertheless, there is still geopolitics in the basis of everything, and the opposition of the powers, and it works inside the Western world and inside the Arabic world, and we can see how it is not united because of different political powers involved, and maybe not that much. Maybe this factor doesn't work that much in Latin America, but nevertheless, thank you for the short answer. I would have divided these geopolitical definition into two parts. The first one is geography and politics. That is the preliminary point. And in general, this is the concept of the geographical policies of the territories. That is a traditional geopolicy. And since that time, lots of things have changed, because we had one world before. In the 19th century, the world was different when this concept appeared, and nowadays we have another opinion about the world, because at that time the sea was considered to be very important. It was very important to have the entrance to the sea to be able to trade, and that was the interest of the state, and therefore the new empires were building around this topic, and we're not going to discuss it now. But nowadays the concept has changed a bit, and in the modern, or let's say new or modern politological schools, because there is also the modern one, but let's stop on the new one. There is an approach where the countries can be far from each other, but if we look at the globe, there is nothing common between them and no common interest. And nevertheless, the trade between them is very intensive, and it is more intensive than the trade with the neighbors, for example, the US or Japan. There are lots of examples of this situation when the bond between the different states is very strong, and it is defined by the economy, but not by the geography. And that is the new geopolitics, as long ago it was considered to be geoeconomy, and it was defining the balance between the economies. And the modern geopolicy, that is the policy of morality, of values, maybe a geophilosophy, and the modern philosophers are trying to reconsider these facts and to express it in some new way. So there are the common values: democracy, which was mentioned before by Oleksiy. So the democratic world, the authoritarian world, the division of the countries into camps, and that was very typical for the Biden some long ago, when they were talking about the threat for the democracies from the authoritarian regimes, authoritarian tendencies. And taking into account these moral values, the new partnership is being established with different coalitions, or with the USA, typically with the USA, maybe some bilateral cooperation. For example, tomorrow in the US, we shall have the meeting between the heads of the US, Japan, and the South Korea. Japan and South Korea are the partners of the US, and they have the agreement, and they are very important economical partners. But the relations between Japan and South Korea are not that good and not very positive history, and they have something to remember about the past conflicts. But nevertheless, today we have the new situation, and Japan is trying to make them get better friends, and that is also the attempt to create some coalition, not only vertical one like the US and their allies or the partners, but to include these partners in some kind of circle. And on this stage, I'm thinking how to pass the floor to our second participant, and I remember the first point of the discussion. We wanted to establish what is going to dominate in the next in the future, the rule of law or law of the jungle, which works the best. This is the question which we are discussing for a long, and I remembered Angela Merkel's words after some communication, after some meeting with Putin, maybe after the first Minsk agreements or the second ones, and she said that Putin lives in another world, that he is that the world he lives in does not meet the values of Angela Merkel and the rest of the world. And he's kind of in another world. He thinks with another categories. He has another values. And because of these, he cannot be controlled, and he is not understood by the rest. And so since that time, a long time passed, and she has retired, and people's political world has started to forget her. But now I would like to say that we are living not in the world of Angela Merkel, but we live in the world of Vladimir Putin, and he made us live in this world, and he forced us to do that. And you, as a participant of those agreements, of Minsk agreements, maybe you can continue this thought, or maybe you can oppose me. So what is the world we are living in? Vladimir Putin's or Angela Merkel's? We are living in the world where moderators live in the world, ask the questions, and they are answering them. Politicians create the new ways for the development, and they do not follow it. So maybe in the world where we cannot forecast what will happen in the nearest future. So I will try to explain why it is important to discuss these kind of questions, not only in Peking, Washington, or in big security congresses, why it is important for Ukraine to discuss these kind of issues, and how does it impact, what kind of impact does it have on our situation in Ukraine. So as, for example, the discussion about how long will the war last? 2-3 weeks? Or now they say that officially they say that the next year will not be the end of the war, and some experts say that it will last for 15 years. And all of these things, I would say that it's not worth our attention, because all these assessments are not based on the evaluation of the factors of the development of the world, of the global factors. And no, there is no computer in the world, even the most powerful ones, will not be able to evaluate that. Nobody will get deep into the soul of Putin's soul, because on the different stages he was different. The good example is Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. If you compare these two people who used to be the representative in New York of the UN, in the UN, and then for some time the minister, and now he the propagandist of the war, there are different people. So maybe there are some global factors, global processes which we have to take in account, and that can have an impact on the world and the development of the world. Answering your question on the rule of law or law of jungle, I will express my personal opinion, and I consider that to be important to evaluate and to understand. I think that we can consider that the rule of law or and we have to take in account the strengths of the army and also the capability of the nation to unite, and that is at most important nowadays. So now it's not only prevailing over the rule of law, but even substituting it, and the system of international organizations who are acting on the work of the security systems and the events which are happening nowadays. The invitation when Putin is invited to G20 in India, and nevertheless he's the war criminal and he's invited there, and Ukraine is not invited on the summit where the food security programs are going, food safety programs are going to discuss. It's not tragic for Ukraine, nothing tragic so far, but that is the signal for the world. But in my opinion, it can be considered a catastrophe for the world. But if they consider that this development is good, in this case, that is also, we can say that they are taking into account the strengths, the army's strengths, and that is why the next stage depends on whether we understand that there is not going to be the gradual development in 10-15 years. It's not going to be the development which is based on the logics of the previous changes. That are going to be very rapid changes, and one of them examples is the war of the Russian Federation in Ukraine. I took the book with me, The Global Changes of the World, and that is it was published in the US, and it is important because we can evaluate how these forecasts were well assessed. And when it was published, I was analyzing it for very deeply. It was published in 2008, and they were involving not only reconnaissance but also all the think tanks on different continents. So first, 6 very deep discussions were made to evaluate the situation. And the paradox is that if you read this book, it is also available in Ukrainian, and you will read it, you will see that all the factors are correct. All the factors used for the assessment are correct, and some of the assessments are correct. But first of all, you see that the evaluation, the assessment of the situation in the Russian Federation it was not correct. So it was considered that the Russian Federation will be more liberal, and that they really need it. And of course, it doesn't mean the truth. The second one, where the main conflict is happening, it's happening in Europe and not in India and Pakistan. And the complete mistake of the assessment of the consequences. So you can understand everything. You might understand how everything works in the economical world. You can understand who are the main actors in this world, but sometimes you are not able to foresee these kind of events, which can change the entire situation. And that what has happened with the Ukrainian with the Russian war. Everyone considers that to be the hypothetical mistake, but that they have chosen the wrong way, but it happened in this way. And the conclusion is that, and I can prove it with many factors, that the countries who will not enhance their army, who will not enhance their economies and demography, and I would like to remind here that we came back to the war where, despite all the missiles, all the jets, the potential of the militaries is the key element, and the number of them, and the number of these people. the people who are motivated and who have weapons. So we came back to these kind of wars, and in these kind of resources, the countries with better resources win. And if the country is economically strong, they have diversification of the fuel supplies, and they do not depend on the key centers, key economical centers. In this case, this country has the chance to survive in this world. The country which is going to show its weakness, it is going to be attacked, and it is just the beginning. What you can see in Ukraine is just the beginning. So we are in the So it is going to happen periodically. I wouldn't like to use the word cascade, but I do not want that to become the reality. But everything tells us that the wars will continue. And the question is, what kind of wars are that going to be? The regional, the local? What is the type of these wars? The global system was not able to shift to the new stage without the wars. So the attempt to use the pandemic as the catalysator of the system change and migration of people, by the way, the massive migration of people, the change of the international human demographic imbalances. And if this war wouldn't have started in Europe, it would have started in another place. But the only thing is that we had some specific neighbors who like to repeat their mistakes, and they do not care what is written in the books. They read the books where it is written that Europe is weak and the US is the worst country in the world. So that is the books they are reading, and that is why they made this mistake. So the rule of law, just forget about it. We will have the development of the network of not organization, but different actors, state ones and non-state ones. I think that are going to be the groups like a military group Rammstein, which are going to unite around some interests. If you even watch Rammstein group, there was a question whether democracies can fight. That are mainly democracies, but there are also countries from Asia and Africa. So there is no kind of military division. So is it possible to have wars between democracies? Yes, absolutely. Moreover, they are coming soon. That are the conflicts. And if we will not reduce the number of the conflicts, that will happen. The Pandora's box is open already, and I do not understand what arguments we can use to stop these escalation. So why am I saying all of these things? I do not want to frighten you, but all of these groups and the scenarios of out of all of these scenarios which were mentioned in these books, the worst one are happening. The West is becoming weaker. The impact of the US is weaker. The US is leaving Afghanistan, and then they are leaving the seas. And unfortunately, all of these things are happening. We can see what is happening in the Black Sea. We can see what is happening in the Eastern Chinese Sea. And therefore, the conclusion is very simple. Ukraine cannot rely, first of all, on any international legal mechanism for establishing peace. We can use it, we can call, we can urge for this, but there is no consensus around the world that are the main rules to finish and the factories which will finish the war. The second thing, we as Ukraine, we are not able to rely that without the resources, the Russian Federation, in our case, will stop the war. Only by force. We can only force them to stop this war. And the third thing, we have to understand that only our potential and only all these strengths which we have and the strength consolidation can help us to overcome this war. And we do not have, we are not able to choose the best time for us, because every day and every extra month is the worst scenario for us. So we have no other option, taking into account how the world develops. So we have to enhance our own military military, our own army, that is our own army of drones, that are the missiles which can reach the European part of the Russian Federation, and we need to, which are able to reach Moscow, at least 1,000 of them, including 1,000 kilometers and even 2,000 kilometers. We have no other option to survive, and if we will not survive if we will not understand that the membership in NATO is becoming just utmost important task for us, and actually we have to accept this reality. In the next 10-15 years, that is going to be a pragmatic, cynic way of development. And the example, and those leaders who are talking about the climate changes, they are already discussing without Ukraine, how to establish peace in Ukraine without Ukraine. I'm not going to name these people, but all of you understand who I'm talking about. So we have to understand that. And of course, I have to mention that in this forecast, there is one more important thing. We should not repeat the mistakes. The triggers for these changes would be most likely not technological innovation. So we thought that are going to be something like artificial intelligence, the possibility of the global internet, and even the cosmic programs development are not going to be the catalysts. The competition of the international actors are going to become these catalysts. Maybe there are the states, maybe the international organizations, and that is obvious at the moment. This time is going to be characterized by these kind of changes. These kind of innovations are going to be the factor only of the force. So they are not going to unite people. Therefore, we have to understand that many actions are very subjective. So the leadership in progress and the leadership in destruction are going to be the key factors, and they are going to develop. And if you remember, if you saw that there was 35 years of weak leadership, except for Margaret Thatcher and Reagan, maybe the period of some periods we all know, but in general, that is the example of the weak leadership. And nowadays, we will find these leaders. And most likely, we are going to find the leaders who are the destructors in the beginning. But later, as a response to these actions, we will find the leaders who will be able to contradict these actions. Therefore, I think that in the world in the future will be divided maybe in two groups, as China wants the People's Republic of China wants it to happen, or maybe more regionalized, and we will have a few power centers and some centers, and we will have a network of the states. So we are coming to the time when the world is going to be very difficult, and sometimes chaos will be very threatening. The actors will be uniting those ones which we would consider to be the antagonist, because, for example, we can see that the Russian Federation can cooperate with the People's Republic of China in the framework of their programs in Antarctic. So now I'm going only to reply the answers. So maybe then I will just recap. Thank you very much, Oleksiy, for not just detailed answer and speech, but to be honest, it seemed to me even to be too much pessimistic, because as far as understood from Valeriy Chauli's point of view, the vision of the future is that the world is going to degrade. The regress there is going to be an anthroponomy in the world, and everything is vanishing, and what we have now, and the forming of these networks. So the world the world is on the edge of the war of all against all. So we will have the wars which will cause each other, and as a result we will have the prevail only of the force will prevail, and there will be no place for the law, and we will see that there are going to be lots of challenges in the next 10-15 years until the new generation, the new leaders will appear, new leaders who would be able to create the new picture of the world, the new political map of the world, or even the new system of the international organizations and relations. Well, actually, it's very pessimistic, and if we want to live in the world like this in the next 10-15 years, so I'm actually, if you don't mind, I will clarify it. It doesn't mean that everyone will live in this world. It means that the countries will try to avoid living in the centers of escalation. So the war can be in Europe or in Asia. So there would be NATO and Rammstein working together, and they will not allow the war to enter some territories. And I'm talking about these kind of things. And I think that there are no going to be global nuclear war. So mainly, I think it's not going to be cascade, because as far as I understand, that is increasing escalation, but that is going to be the series of the regional conflicts which will draw our attention to them. But it is possible to avoid it. It is possible to avoid this war on your territory. Temporary, but as a result, if you are not able to protect yourself, you will not be able to avoid it, because as we have seen, the modern Ukrainian history shows that weakness is provoking, and our weakness provoked this Russian aggression against Ukraine. So now I would like to pass the floor to Oleksiy Haran. Oleksiy, Mr. Haran, I'm very sorry. And I would like to ask you the same question: the rule of law or the rule of jungle? From what Oleksiy has said, we can we can say that the rule of law is possible only when you have a weapon enhancing this law. So I went further. So do you agree with this statement that when we had, we can say that before that we had a kind of not hegemonic role of the US, but at least it was dominating, and at that time we had more rule, and the laws were applied not automatically, but this law did not allow to do some crimes, and what we can do to make penalty mandatory. So Vladimir Putin considers himself he thinks that he got used to impunity. He has personal immunity, and the Russian Federation is a sovereign state, and they refuse to follow the international law. They are not following the international rules, and they are approving the amendments to the constitution on the priority of the national law above the constitutional, about the international one. And he has to limit his trips abroad, because he is afraid that he would be arrested somewhere according to the order of the international law. And what is more interesting, the international meetings, even in the Russian Federation, he is not holding them in Sochi, which is well reached by the missiles, and even in Moscow he doesn't have this meeting, but he is holding them in St. Petersburg, where he's holding this meeting with the heads of the African countries. And at the moment our weapon is not able to reach that far, to strike these distances. So that is partially a joke, but I might assume that it can be the reality. So he might be afraid, but he might be afraid of us, but we cannot make him face the consequences of violating the laws. So what can we do with that? How we can enhance the rule of law with the weapons? So first of all, I would like to respond, to reflect on Valeriy Chaui's statement. So I was listening to you, and that was very, very rose speech with some sudden tragic emotions. But I need to say that I was thinking about that. Yes, we do need to talk about it. We do need to talk about these kind of things from our TVs, not to make the Ukrainians be afraid of the future, but to explain what kind of world do we live in and how difficult, how complicated this world is, and that even our partners cannot provide us with some simple things which we consider to be something very, very, very much needed. For example, F-16 jets. And what about India? So as Valeriy Chaui said that I do understand why Maveriky is invited to G20 in India. I do respect this country. They succeeded really well, but why not Ukraine? So just to compare Maveriky and Ukraine. So this raw speech is not just justified. It actually makes you think, and it makes you realize that you are living in this kind of world. And I'm thinking, like, how different it is from what one person told us from TV, who was at the time the advisor of the head of the office of the president. And you do understand who I am talking about. So he is not, he doesn't have this kind of position, but he's still sometimes on the screen. So he was talking about the future. So the reality is much stricter. We have to overcome this reality, accept it. And saying this, I was listening to Valeriy Chaui, and I was thinking about the arguments. So Volodymyr Horbach recapping, he said that the world has chosen the way of regression, and I. So from the point of his, from the historian and as a globalist, and when we are getting older, we are always saying, oh my God, what this young generation is doing. We had nothing like that when we were young, but we have forgotten what we were doing when we were young. And if you think of this story, let's consider the 20th century, the First World War, with this balance of the force which we had with this balance of the powers which we had there. Then let's consider 1942, 1943. I think that the totalitarian Germany and Japan are winning, prevailing, and the US did not join at that time. They were just considering the options. So the map of the world which we had in 1942 is just impressive, because it seemed that the totalitarian countries, states will prevail. Luckily, it did not happen, and it appeared to be that if in the long-term perspective, the democracies win, and the Cold War has proved this fact. The Cold War was an attempt to set some new rules for the new world, as it's called Yalta-Potsdam system, and this system collapsed in 2014 with the Putin's aggressions against Crimea. But let's once again think of those Cold War which we had, and thinking of 1970s, and you can look at the map. At that time I was a student, and I remember that really well. More and more countries were becoming red, and that was not just India and China, and that was half of Africa, and that was also Cuba and Grenada and Nicaragua. in Latin America, and at that time it seemed that communism is prevailing, that the West is failing. The Soviet Union was playing on these differences. They were playing on the economic interests. And what about the democracies in the Western Ukraine against the U.S. Missiles? I think you remember them. And that were the liberals who were doing social democracies. It is okay to have the social missile. The U.S. is going to bring that, and that is bad. And there were millions of people who were attending these meetings and these manifests, and it seemed to be like communists will win soon in Italy because they were getting more and more votes on the elections. And at that time, it seems that the Western world is failing, and then that it failed, and it failed. And everything was saying that it will fail, and since during 6 years of Gorbachev, this system collapsed. And after that, we had different times. So, if we're talking about Putin, then Volodymyr was talking about the trade of Putin. The Putin who wanted to create the Eurasian Union, which we do not have. We only have the Eurasian Union. For the countries of Eurasian countries, how many? Just guessed how much do they trade with each other? I do not have the microphone, so... Okay, 5%. 5%. So it means that 95% of trade of these countries goes somewhere outside. So it means that, yes, these countries are uniting, but these countries are uniting around different things because there is no deep economical integration, which is common, for example, for the European Union. And therefore, all these illusions of Putin around Eurasian Union failed. And if we look at the US, in this case, we can see that there were different problems. And one of these problems was that the US won the Cold War. And as a result, McMaster called it, he used to be the advisor, Trump's advisor. He said that the US had strategic narcissism. So it meant that they started to consider the events in some countries in the way as they would like to see that. That the Russian Federation is becoming more liberalized. That in China, in the People's Republic of China, you have the freedom of press, and you can say something there. That Taliban is not Al-Qaeda. That you can work with them, and like the Americans who have these kind of reconnaissance resources, but in fact they did not take in account all of these things. Moreover, the direction of the development of the US did not differ, was not that consistent. McMaster, the General McMaster, he was saying that Americans were in Afghanistan for 20 years. Let's not forget that the Afghanistan war was started by the Soviet Union, and Americans were there for 20 years. And McMaster said that that was not one 20-year-old war, but it was 21-year wars. What does he mean? He means that the US were constantly changing their position. So they were saying, okay, we have destroyed this army that was a part of Taliban, and the war is over. And here we are working, cooperating with this, and here we will do this. So there was not this contingency. And we are not talking about the subjective mistakes, but also, so objectively, the role of different regions was increasing. And we had regional actors, and each of them had their own maps, and it's good when it is just Brazil or maybe India, and it's absolutely different when it's Iran, which is just provoking the nuclear war and destabilization in the East. So yes, we do see the world, and I would like to say that it will be, yes, maybe it will be bipolar, the US and the People's Republic of China, and some countries which did not choose their position. But there is also this third option when we will face Islamic fundamentalism, or maybe that would be multipolar world. But when we are talking about the crisis of the system, of the legislation, or the crisis of democracy, the things which Valeriy was mentioning, it means that we will live in the world where the law of jungle prevails. But I think that we have to understand that every crisis gives us the new opportunities. And after the Second World War, we found this Potsdam system, the Yalta-Potsdam system. Nowadays, these institutes did not work out, but I think that NATO's second, they found their second spirit, and they started to do something. And the Western countries are rebuilding themselves, and they're rebuilding their economy and their military doctrines and the rest, because for them that is, of course, that has an impact on them, and they are going to change their systems. And despite all the problems, the Western world will survive, as they always did. The transatlantic union survived many crises. I used to live in the Soviet Union, therefore I remember all these titles of the newspaper that NATO will disappear, NATO, the European Union will disappear, no, that will happen tomorrow. I do remember all of these things. That is the first thing. But of course, it's not going to be a linear process. The second thing is that what is happening now, and it's kind of a union against the prevail of the People's Republic of China. And the third thing is, when we're talking about the global world, I can say a lot about it, because yes, I will just say that I could have talked about it. But these countries, they saw what the violation of the basic principles of the international rules leads to. Yes, they say that it's not our war, we have to consider in a different way, but the changes are also happening there. When we're talking about the law of jungle, these things really matters for all these countries, and the changes which are happening now there, they are not a coincidence. So 144 countries support us in the EU. Yes, in many cases that is just a formal diplomatic support. Thank you very much. Thank you, Oleksiy, Mr. Haran, that you responded, and thank you for balancing the position of Mr. Valeriy's position with your own arguments. Yes, that is the justified pessimist and the justified optimist. So moderate pessimist and moderate optimism. So yes, we need to use the Oleksiy Haran has mentioned how the times when we were young, and that we were also different. When we were the young democracies, we also lived without the air raid alarms, and we had some protests, and we did not risk with anything. I do not know how we are going now to react, because there is the air raid alarm is happening. My colleagues are going to watch it. Do we have the shelter here? And if we will understand that there is a threat, then we will move to the bomb shelter. Thank you. Dear colleagues, please tell us, those who are in the auditorium, please tell us, maybe we need to go to the shelter. So if there are the young democracies, and Ukraine was called the young democracy, in this case, we also have the mature democracies. And for example, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. So yeah, the symbol of West is a group of 7. That is a group of leaders of the Western world, the democratic countries. But if we have young democracies, in this case, we have the new type of democracy, that is over mature democracies. And for example, let's look at the US. The second election campaign is coming soon, and the main candidates are the people who are over 80 or over 70, both of them. And the choice of the society is between these two very mature men. And yes, they have very they are symbolizing the concentration of the interests of the different groups of American society, of different groups of people. And that is the first step to say that democracies can be also over mature. Oleksiy was saying that, mentioning the Soviet history and the Cold War. And in the Rome times, they were democracies which were dying. They were becoming over mature, and they were dying. And after that, the dictatorships were coming, and then we had monarchies. So what is the question? The question is... The question is to Valeriy, Mr. Valeriy, about the US. So what is actually happening in the US, and why it is losing an impact in the world? When you're present there, you do not allow them to unite and to create some certain Iran-Chinese border and maybe some buffer zone or condominium with Afghanistan, or similar things. So the US left Iraq, they left Afghanistan. The balance of powers has changed, and the Russian Federation entered Ukraine. So when the US left Afghanistan, that was one of the factors why they are allowed, because they saw that it's the signal on the change of powers, and these change of powers signal mean that the US is losing. And the second press is that the world is, all these democratic countries, the mature democracies, they are going to be aside of these conflicts and these wars. They will try to be as far as possible from these conflicts. So, Mr. Valeriy Chawi, what is happening? What is going on in the US? So, I thought that we will have a discussion on these good arguments, but the moderator is... would like to change the topic. So let's try to do that. But I would like to respond to the very interesting thing which our professor said. So here I would like to explain you why doesn't my words contradict what you've said. So I would like to emphasize the fragmentation way of the world. It's going to happen somewhere. It's going to be the world of jungle, for example, Yemen, Sudan, and as we can see now. So sometimes in some places the people will die, like millions of people will die. In some places there would be control and stability, and they will use some kind of safety umbrellas. So we were moving to the global world, but we will come to the world of fragments. So I will show you a good example, the labor example. So according to the forecast, the labor will be migrating, and the strong countries would be the ones who will create the attractive, interesting conditions for the labor. And what can we see now? For example, Ukraine. During the last 3 months, more than 7,000 IT specialists lost their job. They lost it not because they started to work worse, but because the companies who are hiring them, they do not know what is going to happen with them in the next months. So these people can be mobilized to the army, and they understand that they can use their employees, and they are refusing from these employees. And if these people are moving to their territories, in this case, they are ready to work with these people. So what does it mean? So the freedom of movement and the freedom of the professionalism, they became very important factors. So if the new arguments like that appeared, why these general factors of globalization do not work? So they do work if the world is absolutely free, if there are no dictatorships, voluntarism, and totalitarianism, and if there are any kind of manifestation of these things, they are stopped. So we can see that the African leaders, some of them, they are 50 years. One of them was killed. So the list of the criminals, which is ended by Putin, they see that there is a penalty. Not France, but Japan and Germany, when they showed that they have an interest in geopolitical domination during the Second World War, they were punished by whose actions? By the ones who won this war, by both democracies and non-democracies. To punish who? To punish those who wanted to change the system, the rules of game. Do we see this kind of union against the Russian Federation, who wanted to change the rules of the world with the support of the People's Republic of China? No, we do not see something like that. India did not. India, which borders with the People's Republic of China, which can become the victim of the regional conflict. India does not do anything. The problem is that I do not understand why they can't see anything, and therefore I'm saying that the world will be fragmented, and I cannot say whether there would be two fragments, a transatlantic line, and on the other side maybe the south and the global south with the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, or maybe that will be the global south, which we used to call the countries of the Third World, or maybe they are going to look for their own niche in this resilience, and they would try to find something there and there. So the world can live according to the rule of jungles in some regions, but in some places it can be stable. So I'm talking about this kind of world where 50 countries have united, and in this world there is no place for the UN, no role at all. There is the role of the Union of nuclear countries and nuclear states, the US, France, and maybe Ukraine will join NATO, and these umbrella and these countries who are in the European Union, and also Canada and the US, and maybe the countries of the Russia likes to say the countries of the global West, big West, for example, Australia or South Korea. But finishing my speech, I do not understand how it can be unified in this world. It's interesting what Mr. Oleksiy Haran thinks about that. So you were asking about Biden. So the next summit would be dedicated to democracies, and he came as every U.S. president. He has chosen his own topic, the topic which is not related to what is going on. So he has chosen this topic, and to be honest, I cannot see any kind of global result. Valeriy Charlie has invited me to join this style. Like I said, that my problem is that typically I agree with Valeriy. So now when I'm listening him in different programs, I consider that to be kind of commerton. So I'm comparing my vision and his vision. So here I would like agree with him, but the only thing I would like to add is that Biden has chosen the topic democracy against autocracy, but it was already mentioned, it's not always working in this way, because if we're looking at the elections and the votes in the UN, we can see that Arabian countries, are they democratic? No, but they are voting for the Ukrainian integrity, as well as authoritarian regimes vote for the Ukrainian integrity. Is the Republic of Turkey a democratic country? So, well, we do understand what we are talking about. We are saying that when we are discussing the division in the world, it's not that strict that there are democracies and autocracies. Yes, there are more aggressive regimes which strive to change the world, and there is the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, Iran, and also the aggressor, Northern Korea. And Valeriy was mentioning the Second World War, that the winners punished the ones who failed this war. But the winners didn't become the winners in one day. Or we cannot say that Stalin did not violate these rules. Everything was violated. But later, the situation has changed. And therefore, in politics, any kind of alliance are possible, and democracies are also under threat, as we have seen. And Orban and Trump are the examples. And if we are considering the global south in this case, the situation is very complicated. So I will say in one word. So what was my mistake? Till 2022, I understood why many countries did not support us as Ukraine. They were saying that, okay, there is conflict. The Russian Federation is saying, no, you are not there. Something is happening there in Ukraine. So, but in this case, everything is obvious. Everything is obvious. And I thought that all these states will have to come with a statement. The India, the African countries, everyone has to unite. And we have to have thousands of people coming against that. And I was so naive. I was on Indian TV and I was calling people I was urging them to come to the Russian embassy and protest. And then I was told that it was counterproductive, because in their heads they have absolutely different picture. What they are observing with the mother's milk. For example, the former French and British colonies, who are they? They see colonialism everywhere, and the Soviet Union was helping them to overcome colonialism. But that is a separate topic. But in their head, the West is bad. So what do we have what do the Latin America have in their minds? The US is bad. And therefore, if the US is supporting someone, it means that there is something wrong there. So Ukraine is a puppet of the US. The same thing the Asia and the African countries think. And that shows how difficult it is to work with them. And if you understand that if they absorb this with the milk of their mothers, in this case, we have just to make our way through this approach. And India is just playing on a few fields at the same time. Yes, it is. Yes, as they are saying themselves, the Russian Federation is a contradiction to the People's Republic, to China. On the land, the US is the contradiction to the recipe on the sea. And of course, the main problem is the recipe, but we have to be friends with the Russian Federation, and they are building all their policy around these. So that is why it is so contradictory. And speaking of the morality, what can we say about the morality? Well, but once again, that is the reality. How do we need to work in this country? And now let's remember what kind of resources does the Russian Federation have and how much do they invest in these resources. Once the ambassador in one of the countries told me, I have tried the box of chocolates and I can say that it was Russian candies. Not because it is political issue, but it was just the writer. He says, oh, how nice. I will have something to invite the foreign diplomats, because when you're coming to diplomats, they have red caviar, black caviar, they have everything, and there are no resources. But nevertheless, we have the rule of truth. You are so. I didn't tell you what the ambassador has offered me. So he has offered me the bottle of tequila, but I couldn't take it because I did not have hand luggage with me. So that was so stupid. He says, like, drink. And I'm asking, in one day? No, I will not manage that. So you should have shared it with friends at least. It's a pity we were not with you at that time. It's a joke. And coming back to a serious topic, Valeriy his thesis was that the world is becoming more fragmented, and what is the initial state? The initial state is the integrity or the global one. For a long time, we used to live in the global world, and we were using the fruits of this global economy, of the global competition, and the enhanced economy. So maybe now we're in this state. I was mentioning the entropy or the violation of the destruction of the international law, and I think that it's also the stage of deglobalization. And what is the idea? What was the idea against this deglobalization? It was considered that the collective West and the US are the leaders and the beneficiaries of this globalization, even though they were not the only ones who were the beneficiaries. They were the ones who won and who lost, but it was not that obvious that the US just won, and otherwise we wouldn't have had the response to this globalization of those Trump voters, because if they didn't have we didn't come to the American question. And to be honest, I would like to finish this meeting with the topic of the recompilation of the new international order in the new framework, because what we can see now, it is being destroyed, and our brain thinks that there should be some new order which has to be defragmented. Maybe these fragments will form the new system, because the system is degrading, because the international organization, they are dying. We do not need them anymore. Mr. Valeriy has mentioned the UN. Well, in the times of globalization or discussions against globalization, it was said that cooperation will substitute the states, national states, and now I just saw that the Organization of the United Corporations may take their places. And nowadays the war can show that it will not happen as well, because that's also not true, because we're considering ourselves as a nation, and we understand that not the corporations are going to fight each other, but the nations, the state nations. We are becoming more and more, we consider ourselves more and more as nation state, and we're the same as the others. And what is going to happen next? How this defragmentation will happen, and all of this depends on the results of, first of all, the results of our war, which we have to call the Russian war. By the way, in the world, I was coming this way, and I read the comments, how, like, Ukrainian crisis, Ukrainian conflict, now they can say Ukrainian war. And that means that these people, they are in the Russian field. They are looking from the Russian point of view. That is war in Ukraine. That is Ukrainian war. For us, it is Russian war, and it is important not only to prevail on the front line, but also on the mindset level. And Mr. Oleksiy was mentioning the system which was established after the Second World War, Yalta-Potsdam system, the series of international conference, Tigran, Yalta-Potsdam. And the winners in the framework of these congresses, they established a new order, and the Russian Federation, at least, they are using their membership in the UN to escape the punishment. And now I have the question to both my colleagues: what is your opinion? Should this Russian war be finished by the international conference on the questions, on the issues of the Russian Federation? The international conference, which would be dedicated to creating the new order and coming back to the geopolitical issue that is the order in the territories. So how we can transform the Russian Federation in something else, in something not aggressive and not threatening thing for the neighbors. And I hope that as a result of our victory, we have to have some international conference. We have to, maybe we can reform the UN or something like that, and that could have made, let's say, so the process, this would have helped us not avoiding the repetition of these things. I think that your question is actually the clue, because we are very naive and we are not using the factors around us, and we want to picture something ideal for us. And this picture was the result of the Second World War, when we had the collision of the Second World War, and the violators, those who violated the rules, they were brought to the court. It will not happen. All the factors which are considered by the big politicians are considered, it shows that we are moving in absolutely different way, and I clearly see that the world is moving in another direction. When did we make this turn after the Russian full-scale war? We can even approximately remember that, but we have made this turn, and we've made the turn to the place where no conferences on the Russian Federation will never take place unless the Russian Federation will not collapse and it will not divide into some territorial groups. But nevertheless, nobody is promoting this kind of model. There is no one in the world except Ukrainian politologists, and also the minister is doing a lot to help that. And there is a group of people who are meeting and who are discussing what are we going to do with the Russian Federation. I didn't go there because I do not know what to do with the Russian Federation nowadays, and maybe my colleagues have the strategic vision, and I'm still thinking tactically. So this scenario, it is desired, but it is the least likely to happen. There is another scenario where we have isolation, where the Russian Federation with a group of other states is isolating themselves on some territories, and then there is a question. For the Russian Federation to have the development, they need at least 270,000 people living there. So you can ask the economists for the internal development. They are making some approximate models, and the Russian Federation will need around 270,000. Why do they want to get people from here? Why do they come here to take out children? Because that is at most important resource for the next 10-15 years. There are people who are going to work, and therefore the Russian Federation understanding these, they are going to try to bring everything to the Russian Federation. And as far as I understand, you were mentioning the US, so we were discussing the tendencies, more concentration on their needs, and Afghanistan is one of the reasons, except all those you mentioned, the people got tired and they wanted to get more focus on their own needs. And I'm sure that we have to consider these facts, which is obvious now, and we have to understand that 2 + 2 is 4 and not 5, and we have to apply this experience to what is going to happen with the Russian Federation. So I'm not going to go deep dive into this topic, but we have to think about another thing. We have to think on how we can stop the Russian Federation on the front line and how we can involve these leftovers of the previous system. We are still using it because some nations, some countries, some states are still using these leftovers of these systems. But the more you're going to face with this problem with Putin, you will understand that this system is very fragmented. If Southern Africa thought that yes, we have to do something, India will not do that, and the US do not want to ratify the statute, and Ukraine doesn't do that as well. So let's be honest. So that is what you were speaking of, the interest and the balance of powers. Maybe the balance of powers is not the very correct thing, but the interests are going to prevail, and the values, the values, we will not have this kind of approach when we are uniting around the democratic values. So I would like to add one more thing. What would we have to draw attention to? Speaking of competition, and what would be the key competition points where Ukraine has to be strong and where we have the opportunity? So first of all, it is obvious that we have to enhance the military strengths. And when people are saying that the Russian Federation is the second army of the world, and then when I hear that the Russian Federation is the second, and now we can see that they are not the second, just check these resources. They are considering the resource of the country, their territories, the territories and the population, and that is the reason why the Russian Federation is not the second, is the second after the Ukrainian army, because the war, in this war, they are not using the factors which are better there, the nuclear war and the population. So we can shift to another stage, and then they are going to become the second army of the world. Even though we would like to hide that, yes, Ukraine is fighting the second army of the world, the China, who wanted to become the second army of the world, and according to these forecasts, they had to become the first one, and they did not become the first army of the world. And the US is still the first one. But now we will have the fight for the fresh water. When we will have the compete for the metals, which allow us to get more efficient components, and to be brief, there are accumulators which are used in the vehicles. They will use it in the planes, and they are ready, but they are still looking for the solution with the GPS, and they are going to use it. And now attention, they are going to use with the resources which we have in Ukraine, which are actually in the military actuary territories in the south, close to Bakhmut. There is a triangle there, the triangle where they know exactly what they are fighting for, water, fresh water. It is very important. 200 million people have moved because migrated or will migrate in the nearest future because they do not have the access to fresh water. In Africa, there are the regions where there is only where only 15% of people can get access to the power supply. Mr. Oleksiy was going to the countries where electricity was available, but there are the countries where there is no power supply at all. So that is one of the factors, food resources, absolutely, because the middle class has grown up, and the people in China wanted to eat something as well, not only rice but also meat, and meat is also very requires territories, and nobody wants to eat the artificial meat. Did you try the artificial meat? Because I tried it. And I have to say that it's still very expensive, and all these workers, you remember the movie The Fifth Element, where they are eating the artificial meat, or where they are using, I think that the movie was as of 1990s, and we already had these kind of workers. Can you eat the artificial meat? Yeah, but a bit, because it is expensive. And therefore, maybe we need to change the needs. And if we have the same needs that no, in this case, Ukraine has to have the fresh agriculture. That means that the agriculture will grow, will be more pricey, not as it is now in the Republic of Turkey, when they are just proceeding the wheat we have grown out, and also power production. And we are considering the factors of biofuel and the pollution and then the independence of the power supply and the coal mines. And now they will close their eyes on the climatic changes. And prior to these, there were the summits, and you can see that the biggest typically they were just saying nothing except energy. And all these climatic changes, they are already happening, they are going to happen in the future, and nobody is actually doing something. They will continue saying something, but yeah, we need to survive in this new world. And the competition is very, very big on robot techniques, and starting from the simple things like drones, which we're using on the front line, and drones are the mining, drones are agriculture. And I have to say that in the US, for example, the order for the drones were given to all of the universities a long time ago. I have seen those competitions, and all of the universities applied. 17 universities got the financing for the drone development, and I can see these planes that are big models, big planes. And who was ordering that? We do understand that Pentagon was one of the orders. Who they were ordering for those young people who can do it fast and creatively, and who are not overwhelmed with all these morality that are always so complicated. You have to understand the bureaucratic regime, the bureaucratic system, and the integrity of the society, and also cosmos, space, and why it is going to be so fragmented. Because the US created GPS, and later the militaries have shared it with us, but the Russians created GLONASS. The Chinese people are doing their own one. Indians are doing the same. Chinese are going to do the wired optical internet lines, and we are going to have the underwater drone war. But I think that everyone will have their own access, and the countries with space programs who have the information from the satellites will be secured. Unfortunately, Ukraine, despite all our attempts with the satellites, I'm not going to deep dive into details. We are very dependent on the rest of the world, the space country which could have done that ourselves. So now we are talking about the capability to construct our own planes and ships. And 10 years ago, we considered that to be a waste of money and time. And now we do not consider that to be a waste anymore. And the military vehicles as well. So the trigger for the development of Ukraine might be not the ideas of the general ideas, but the combination of them with Vipakov with artificial intelligence, and there are the digital technologies, and all of these represent the development. And the era of this freedom of the artificial freedom, it is going to be over, and we are going to come back to the control of the borders. And you will see that unfortunately that will happen. For instance, as of the 1st January, if you're going to the European Union by car, you will need to get the permission. Yes, but that is the hidden substitution of the. And it's not the point of 5-7 years. It's the point that they want to have a control, because they faced lots of issues with the spies. Not everyone thought that it's just the Muslim fundamentalism, but it appeared to be that there are 2 people with Caucasian features and from the Russian Federation, and they are not Muslim, they are not from Arabian countries, and they are poisoning you with Novichok. So that is terrorism, and the ideology of terrorism, whether it is fundamentalism or racism, that doesn't matter. And and at the same time, the terrorism which we got used to and which used to be the enemy of all and everyone. For example, how we talked a lot about the Taliban, and now they have an agreement with the Taliban, and now they respect people. The Russian Federation, the Russian Federation, they are meeting them. And before that, the US was joining with the Russian Federation against Taliban, and now it is beneficial for them. And now the Russian Federation has the official meetings with the Taliban, and the US, before leaving the Afghanistan, the Burns, the head of CSI, they were meeting Taliban, but it's right. They are showing that you can sit at one table with a terrorist, that among them armed so there can be different countries that there are some bigger terrorists, some less terroristic organizations, so it's like sorry for this wording, but it's like motherfucker, but it's our motherfucker. So our dreams, Ukraine has to forget about its dreams. We have to be more pragmatic, and I'm afraid that we might lose this moment. The world has changed, and we will not be able to change anything. So we have to stop the Russian Federation in the right way, and not to lose this opportunity. And that is the most difficult thing. And now one more factor: the quality of the control of the states, of the companies. So we had one great Zuckerberg innovator, and then we had Elon Musk, who is a good innovator, and he just wanted to change something. So he wanted to have X there, the X which he wanted X. So he has done it, and the actions have failed, so he lost billions. So these kind of things which are going to happen, they are going to be spontaneous, and they are going to be illogical, they are going to be odd, but that will be our reality. And therefore the informational security, the increase of the critical thinking awareness, we have the project in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. We can see that the level of the critical thinking is decreasing among the young people, about this, among the students. I'm not even talking about the elderly people. They are not reading the books. So they are consuming the external products very easily. So we were given an example of one person. To be honest, I'm very easy about that. So he has done his role. The product is not that Arestovich is a professional person. He is professional not at what people thought he is, and he was demonstrating. But the thing is that how people changed their mind in 180% in 1-2 weeks. He was the third in the race of the for the president position, and in 3 weeks he lost 80%, minus 80% of the categorical unacceptance. Just imagine this kind of society which can be that easily manipulated. That is an awful situation. So finishing. So I'm stopping and I'm passing the floor. So these topics are not covering the geopolitical issues, but thank you very much for this emotional and live speech, because we have heard a lot of interesting things. And nevertheless, me as moderator, after this speech, I do not think that I can make any conclusions, and I'm passing this role. So we are talking for half an hour and a half, and our audience is tired. Therefore, a short conclusion, recapping of our discussion, Professor Haran. So the conclusion of such intellectual discussion cannot be brief. And I was thinking, who was saying that? Maybe you're a Marxist against this global imperialist, or maybe the potential author of Anti-Utopia, because that is what we were watching and reading, watching in these movies and reading these books. Yes, we live in this, but yes, you're correct. We have to think about this, and we have to have our eyes open, and we have to understand what is happening. So what we have to expect from the Russian Federation. Volodymyr Horbach works a lot with works on the issues of the Russian Federation collapse, but which is scientifically called the organization of the territory of the Russian Federation. But that is just one of the scenarios, and therefore I think that we, as the Western politologists in 1990s, we should not forget about these scenarios. We have to think how we can control this, but we should not rely just on these scenarios. So I even wanted to show you some pictures, and there are some states which we are relying on. Well, these national minority, there are only just 7% of Karelian nations. But that is, I think, the worst case, the worst example, because in some cases it's better, but in some cases in these different republics in the Russian Federation, the number of these nations, ethnic nations, the number of them is quite small. But when we are talking about disintegration of the Russian Federation, in this case, we are talking about regional disintegration, where this ethnical factor will not play important case, where we are talking about Siberian citizens against the Moscow citizens. I think that we are I have asked you about the conclusions, and you start the new topic. What can we expect? So I think that Valeriy has actually said the right things. I think that the realistic scenario is that we have to think on our borders. It will be hard to come back to our initial borders. So we will have to cooperate a lot with our partners to get weapons, but that is the realistic target. And then when we are talking to the people, and people want all of these. They want Putin to be in the court. It's not that much possible, but we have to create the mind of the society. Let's build the mind of the society around these in different countries, and we can see that in the countries which do not belong to the Western world, so people can unite it. The reparation from the Russian Federation, that is going to be a very long process, and therefore I think that yes, we have to think of it, but the priorities should be different. We have to prioritize the integrity of Ukraine. If those who are going to G20, if we say that the main priority is to send Putin to Gaga, I do not think that it's going to be productive. But we have to think of these common points, and the common point is integrity of the Ukraine as a state, and that is what even non-Western countries understand, and what is supported, because that is well understood by them. The colonial country state comes and empire, and they want to colonize you. They understand this discourse. Thank you, Valeriy. Thank you, Oleksiy. So I was sitting between two of you, and I was listening to you, and I was listening to what you were saying, and well, partially your visions are different, partially they are the same, but what is the conclusion? What can I say? So yes, we do live in the world which is transforming. We are fighting in the world which is transforming, and our war is transforming this world as well. It is correct in this transformation, but in the changing world, which is changing so rapidly, actually we are not able to understand how rapidly it is changing, because we're in the process. When you are in the train which is on its way, you understand the speed a bit different. It's very different when you are in the train and when you are watching the train on its way. So nevertheless, our strategic targets are the same. Ukraine, to find its place in the successful new world and to be successful in this future, we need to follow the strategy we have chosen. We have to consider our membership in NATO, and also the economical membership or socio-political union of the European Union. And that are our objectives for our activities, and how the world is going to change, we are going to change with this world together, and we are going to transform together with NATO and together with the European Union. Of course, if we are going to be the part of this system, so we have to undertake lots of efforts to get to this situation, not only the efforts in the war, but also in these external factors, which are also foreseen by our internal transformation. Thank you, the participants, for this discussion. Thank you, our audience, for your attention, and I hope that our discussion was interesting for you, and do not forget to like us and subscribe.